Hey guys, what's going on? Episode 8 of the Next Season podcast. And today we were covering the third pillar, which is about ambition. If you remember when we were talking about the attributes and the traits, talent, effort, ambition, and mindset, and the example we used with the dogs was if you had talent and effort, so you had skills and you were working hard, but you didn't have ambition, you were like a dog chasing his tail, right? You were working hard, but you're running in circles. You're not getting anywhere. And if you don't have something that you're working towards, you could be working really hard, but you're not getting anywhere. And so today I'm going to break down the 5 key elements or the bricks that form the ambition pillar. First is create a player. We're going to talk about the create a player mentality. Second is pitch selection. Third is establishing your zone. The fourth is setting never summit targets. And fifth is tapping into your generative drive. These are powerful concepts. They're rooted in neuroscience, and they're critical to ensuring that your work, the effort that you put in, is aimed towards a specific target, your goals, your dreams, all right, or the things that you want, your ambition. So let's get after it. The first brick is create a player. And this is about creating an identity and what I call identity-based goal setting. And so we all know the importance of setting goals. And one of the most important parts of goal setting and forming and building habits is building an identity around who you are working towards becoming. I call this the create a player mentality. When I used to play video games when I was growing up, I would always start with creating a player. Now, I wouldn't go crazy with the height or the weight. You know, some players, sometimes they like to make 7-foot tall players or really short guys or really big guys. And I wouldn't go crazy, but I would certainly make my characters into realistic studs, right? They were built. But I would add the traits and the attributes. So add those points, those elements. So depending on what game it is, depending on what position you are, you want to add those points to the elements that are, useful for what you're looking to do. Obviously, if we're talking baseball, it's power, it's speed, it's arm strength, it's defense. If you're a pitcher, it's, having control and command of those pitches. There's a whole bunch of traits and skills that you could add points to. Now, some games you could put in as many points as you wanted to, and you just create these freaks, 99s across the board. In other games, you had to get more strategic because they only had a bank of, so many points that you could have. And so you'd have to really think about what it is that you want to do, and then you could accumulate and build more points over time. So that's a little bit more realistic. The point I'm trying to make here is that I was literally shaping and creating the character that I wanted to be or become. What I'm suggesting that you consider in this first brick is the same thing in real life. You want to think about the traits and the attributes of the athlete or the person that you want to be, and then think about what are the work and the habits and the actions that it takes to build the points, right? To add those points across those bars. So think about it this way. Instead of just focusing on what you want to achieve, let's say you have a goal that you want to hit 350 or 300, right? Or maybe your pitcher, you have a target strikeout rate or a certain number of hits that you want to get in a season or stolen bases, whatever those goals are. What are the actions that you need to commit to in order to get those targets? Better yet, pretend you already are that player, that person. What do you do? So if I was coaching you, what I would say is, okay, that's your goal. What are the habits, the routine, the actions of a person who does this? If your goal is to hit 350, okay, so look at somebody who hits 350 in real life, and what do? What do the routines look like? What's the practice habits? What do you believe about yourself? What do you think about? And that's your identity. That's your created player. So then what you do is you forget about those statistical targets and you just focus on the actions of that character, of that person you want to be. There's a great book called Atomic Habits by author James Clear. And he talks about how real change happens when we focus on who we want to become rather than what we want to achieve. So instead of saying, I want to hit 350, you might say, I want to be the kind of person who takes 100 swings every day. Because the person who hits 350 is probably taking at least 100 swings a day. And so the example he provides in his book is about exercise. And he says, it's one thing to say, I want to, or maybe I need to be consistent with exercising. It's a whole other thing and much more powerful thing to say, I am a person who exercises. That's an identity. That's stating who you are and who you want to become. And this has a powerful effect on your brain through neuroplasticity. When you repeatedly think and act like the person that you're trying to become, You're still you. You're still authentically you. You're just you in a different form. Okay. Your brain starts to create new neural connections, which makes it easier for you to stay committed to that identity. And the more you identify as that player, as that person, the more natural those behaviors become. So you've gone from, I need to exercise, to I'm a person who exercises. And now that's ingrained in your character and who you are. Identity influences behavior by shaping self-concept and self-esteem and self-efficacy, which is essentially the belief that you are able to accomplish goals. There's another author, an organizational psychologist named Dr. Benjamin Hardy, and he also talks about creating an identity in his works about what he calls the future self. It's identity-based goal setting. And he says the clearer that you are about who you want to become, the more clear and specific that you can be, the more intentional your decisions will be today. So again, you think about who you want to become and you get very specific about that. The clearer you are about who you want to become, the more intentional your decisions will be today. Okay. The other side of what he talks about is focusing not just forward looking, but balancing reflection as well. So it's really, really important to think about, okay, this is where I'm going. This is what I want to achieve. This is who I want to become. But it's just as important, if not sometimes more important, to reflect on how far you've come. He suggests don't think about it, the gap. There's a gap. There's a space or a delta. There's a distance between where you are now and where you want to go. But instead, also take time to reflect on how far you've come. Okay, this is where I was. This is where I am now. And there's still room for me to get to where I want to go. But if you just focus on where you want to go, that can get too overwhelming and can cause a distraction and maybe frustration. You give up. So reflect on how far you've come. There's two other important things related to this whole concept of identity. And the first is around team identity. So your team culture, your reputation, the identity that you build as a team has an influence on your success and your resilience as a team. Okay. The second is understanding what you are and who you are after you're done playing the game. If your identity is tied to what you did, what you were, what happens when you can't do that anymore? It's vital to tie your identity to who you are and who you can become, not just what you did in the past. And many athletes struggle as their playing days end because very often their identities are wrapped up in what they did, not who they are. And we're going to talk about that at another time, okay? But it's just really important to understand that the creative player mentality is about an identity. It's about establishing identity of who you are and who you want to become, understanding it's the same person, just evolving and growing. So start small, build your identity, write it down, get really specific, right? Who you want to become, what are the habits and actions and traits and characteristics of that person, and then align that with the actions that you can take every single day towards that goal. If you want to be known as the hardest worker, put in the extra reps. If you want to be known as the calmest under pressure, practice deep breathing and visualization. And what you're doing is you're creating your player and you're adding those points to your bars. That's the first brick. The second brick is what we call pitch selection. So if you're a pitcher, you know what's in your pitch arsenal, right? You know what's in your repertoire. You know what pitches you have to choose from, and every pitcher has a unique arsenal. You know what you like to throw. You know what pitches are not working maybe on a given day. You know what you need to throw in order to get hitters out, depending on who the hitters are. So pitch selection and command of those pitches determines everything. And the same goes for life. Here, in what we're talking about, pitch selection is about choosing your values and your vision. Your values are like your pitch arsenal. They're the things that define who you are and how you approach challenges. Are you a person who values integrity or grit or resilience? And these values are non-negotiable. They're your framework for making decisions. Values are the foundation of everything that you do. This is why in episode 5, I talked about the values and the standards, and they define what matters most to you and act as your personal playbook. They're critical because they give you clarity and consistency, especially when you're under pressure. And you want to think of them as decision filters that help you say no to distractions or opportunities that don't align with who you are and where you're going. Think back to that creative player. If there are distractions or things that come up, that take you away from who that person is and what that person does, well, then your values can help you to filter those things out and push them aside. Without having clear values and standards, you're like a pitcher with no plan. You're just going to throw anything and you're going to lose control of your game. So for example, if your pitch arsenal is fastball, slider, curve, changeup, okay, those are your pitches. Those are the ones you practice. Those are the ones you trust. Those are the ones you have on that night. You're not going to go up there and suddenly throw a splitter or a knuckleball. It's not part of your game. That might work for somebody else if it's one of their values, but it's not in your arsenal. So if you get assigned for something like that from the catcher and that doesn't align with your plan or your values, you shake it off and you say no. Stick to what you know works because it's a value. The same is true in life. When you're faced with a decision that doesn't align with your values or your goals or identity, you don't have to hesitate. You just shake it off and move forward. Your values keep you focused. They guide your actions, they guide your behaviors and your decisions to help you stay true to the player and the person that you want to be and the one you are. Okay, so that's values. Then there's vision. Vision is that long-term goal. It's about knowing what success looks like before you even step on the mound. It's like having a game plan for setting up a hitter, right? We know what setting up a hitter is. You're going in and out, you're changing speeds, you might work the edge, you might pound the zone, you might change their eye level, right? That's your game plan as a pitcher. And so your vision is that bigger picture. It's the ultimate outcome that you're working towards. Now here's where the science kicks in on this, and it's fun to talk about. So neuroscience tells us that when you have a clear vision, you're naturally going to be more disciplined towards the pursuit of that. Why? Because your brain focuses on the long-term reward, activating the neural pathways that are tied to motivation and self-control. And this makes it easier to push through those challenges because you're not just reacting in the moment, you're guided by where you want to go. If you want to nerd out on this a little bit, I'm going to expand on it. When you have a clear vision, your brain engages something called the dopaminergic reward system. Now, again, dopamine is often associated with rewards. It's attributed to the feeling you get when you achieve something. That's not always accurate. It's more accurate to describe it as a motivation molecule because it's released when your brain anticipates achieving something meaningful. That's the anticipation of the feelings you get when you accomplish something. So this dopamine release strengthens the neural pathways that are associated with focus and perseverance and decision-making. We talked about this in the previous episode, and it makes you more likely to stick with the actions that lead towards your goal. Vision activates the prefrontal cortex, another part of your brain, and that's responsible for planning and self-control and future thinking. So by visualizing your end goal, you're priming your brain to filter out those distractions and ensure that your choices are aligned closer to the outcome that you want. So it's kind of like having a built-in GPS system, right? You've got a clear destination. Your brain is able to adjust your route when obstacles come up, and it keeps you on track. Without a clear vision, your brain is going to default to short-term thinking. You're going to get stuck chasing immediate rewards instead of working towards that bigger thing. With a vision in place, you see the long-term payoff, and it keeps you locked in. It keeps you disciplined, even when the grind is tough. So your vision sets the course, your values are the pitches you use to execute along the way, and together they create the framework for making those smart decisions and keeping you locked in. So there's your first two bricks. Create a player to establish identity-based goals, and pitch selection to determine your vision and your values. I'm gonna plan a separate episode or a video to dig specifically into goal setting because that's a big one. I think there are some areas that we can improve both our goal setting process and our goal adherence using neuroscience as a guide. And there are certainly commonly used systems that are effective, but I'm willing to bet that there are some things that you do in your goal setting process and your work towards your goals that are actually negatively impacting your adherence and follow through. And I'm going to be able to dig into that a little bit. So, and I could also probably put a worksheet on the website for you. So that's the first two bricks. The third brick is about establishing your zone. And so now we're taking the glove off. We're no longer pitching. Now we're in the batter's box. So imagine yourself stepping into the batter's box. Remember that pitcher has his values that he's trying to do, right? And so it's your job to have your standards and your boundaries to be able to do your job. So the pitcher's trying to paint the corners. They're mixing speeds, right? He's making you chase something out of your zone. So if you don't know what your zone is, what pitch you're hunting for, you might swing at junk and end up frustrated. You're going to ground out, you're going to pop out, you're going to strike out. But when you're clear on your zone, you stay disciplined and you lay off the bad pitches and you focus on the ones that you know that you can hammer. And the same goes for life and performance anywhere else. If you've got clear standards and boundaries, right? We're not talking the values and vision, but the standards and boundaries, which are similar, you're going to know when to take action, when maybe you need to hold back or do something different. So standards, when I think of the strike zone, we think of the K zone. We've got our top and our bottom, we've got our sides, okay? Standards are the top and the bottom of your zone. They define what's acceptable for you, whether you're having a great day or a bad day. You have a ceiling, that highest possible standard, right? And you have a floor, which is the minimum standard, a minimum acceptable standard. And if everything goes sideways at bare minimum, your floor is what you can do, is what you can get done. So standards might be things like your daily commitment to preparation or focus or study, whatever that is, right? There's the habits, there's the things that become your standard. In a perfect situation, you're able to check all those boxes, okay? That's your ceiling. At bare minimum though, what are the things that you know that you need to do to keep moving forward, which you refuse to compromise on, okay? No matter what the circumstances. Your boundaries are the sides. So if the pitch is across the plate, it's a go, right? You've got a green light, you're going. If it's not across the plate, you take it. And in life, if something or someone has proven that they are worthy of being in your boundaries, your hitting zone, they can stay. If they do something that's outside of your boundaries, that violates those boundaries, you let it go. And it doesn't necessarily mean forever, but at least not at that time, not at that pitch, not at that at bat, right? Not in that situation. You're not allowing them in. But be careful, because sometimes people might look like they're in your zone, and then all of a sudden at the last second, they dive down and away. You got to be careful with that. So early in the count, you have strict standards and boundaries. And only when you get deeper in the count do you need to make sure that you're more protective and maybe expand that zone a little bit. Early in the count, you're in control, okay? You know what your standards are. You know what your boundaries are, okay? And then you might have to protect a little bit. But every at-bat is a new opportunity for you to establish and guard that zone. So your standards and your boundaries are your tools to stay consistent and focused. And I don't want to say rules, but in some ways they kind of are, okay? You define what those are for you so that you know what you're willing to accept and what you won't, of yourself and of other people. So set those boundaries, stay focused, and when you do, your zone becomes your default mode. That's your third brick. All right, so now we got brick number 4, and this is called never summit targets. And I want to dive into this never summit mentality, very similar to never settle. So that's you hear that a lot, never settle. And here's the thing. So some players might get a big goal, right? They achieve a certain goal. Maybe your goal was to reach the big leagues, right? You get there and you get complacent. You ease up. Guess what? You're not going to stay there. And so the idea of never summit is that there's never a peak. There is never a point where you have achieved it. You've reached the top. You've never summited, right? There's always something further that you can do, right? So even when you reach the top of that mountain, you're looking up and identifying the next mountain, okay? Now some players, again, they might hit that big goal and they might ease up. They get to the top of the mountain, they stay there. But the elite ones, they know that it's just a checkpoint. It's not the finish line. Continuous improvement is one of the cornerstones of greatness. Elite performers understand that they can never settle, that they can never reach that summit, that they have to constantly be seeking ways to improve and be coachable and be humble in the process. Experts in coaching and performance often emphasize that the most successful people balance two things, right? It's the hunger to keep improving with gratitude for what they've achieved and who they are in that process. So it's not always about being dissatisfied with what you have and constantly desiring more, right? But it's about an understanding there's a process that goes along with it. In what I call ambition or aspiration without attachment. Okay, you're not attached to this thing, this outcome or achievement, but you have relentless and ravenous ambition and aspiration for something. I think Kobe Bryant is probably the greatest example of this with Mamba mentality. Kobe could go up and put 60 points up in a game, and a performance that most players would celebrate for weeks. But he was back in the gym at 3 or 4 in the morning the next day and doing 2 or 3 practices a day, every day, breaking down his footwork, thinking about the things that he didn't do well in that game. Okay. And from a team perspective too, there's a great clip of him that they were up 2 games to nothing or 3 games to nothing in the finals or something like that. And the journalist or reporter asked him about it. He goes, why would I be happy? Why would I be happy? Job's not done. That's this idea of never summit mindset, what separates good players from legendary and elite players. And there's neuroscience to this too. So the brain actually thrives on progression, right? In improvement. And when you set a big goal and achieve it, again, it releases dopamine, and that chemical makes you feel accomplished and motivated. But again, that dopamine rush can fade really quickly unless you give your brain a new target to chase. By setting that new goal immediately, after hitting that last one, you create a continuous cycle of achievement and engagement. And this is going to help you stay focused and energized and hungry for more. But again, this can go the other way. And this is where it can get dangerous. This is where the gratitude piece comes in. There are many times that accomplishing big goals, running a marathon is a commonly used example. And I think it's a perfect example, but that can cause a crash and even put people into depression. And this is because dopamine goes so high and then crashes below baseline. So everyone has a baseline dopamine level. And then as you're pursuing goals and you're working towards them, that dopamine level can increase. And when you achieve it, oftentimes you can crash. And when you do this, it's very often that it crashes below baseline. Many addictive drugs do the same thing. This is why they can be so dangerous, because you experience them once and you crash below that baseline and you want to get back into that high again. And so you do it again and you do it again. And next thing you know, you spiral out of control or worse. And obviously, I'm not saying that running a marathon is as dangerous as drugs, because it's absolutely not, but understand at a basic level how brain chemistry works and how to modulate this. So again, couple important notes: embrace the process and the journey. Remember to focus on effort, not the results or the outcome. Practice gratitude and contentment. It's okay if you're super driven, if you're ambitious and you're goal oriented, but it's also important to recognize your flaws and to give yourself rest and enjoy that view a little bit. So you can be both hungry and fulfilled as long as you're pursuing continuous improvement. That's the 4th brick. Never summit. Now for the 5th brick, which is about generative drive. Okay. Generative drive. It's the ultimate fuel for ambition. It's your internal why. The thing that drives you to show up and to push harder and to chase that growth and to chase that continuous improvement, even when the external rewards are not there. So it's that intrinsic reward system. So unlike temporary bursts of motivation, generative drive is deeply rooted in 3 things. There's a great book called Drive by a guy named Daniel Pink, and he talks about motivators, typically more for the professional, the work setting, but it certainly applies to athletic performance, really anything in life. And the 3 things are autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy is having ownership and control of your path. Mastery is improving and mastering skills or behaviors over time, mastering something. And then purpose is the ability to work towards something bigger than yourself. So if you're looking at having intrinsic motivation, it can really come down to those 3 things: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Owning your path, improving over time, and then working towards something bigger than yourself. Experts in the fields of psychology and human behavior realize that motivation isn't about carrot and stick strategies, whether they're self-imposed or they come externally. In fact, oftentimes those carrot and stick strategies are very short-term. They might be effective in very short-term situations, but they're not long-term strategies. In fact, MRIs show that all human motivation stems from the desire to avoid pain and discomfort. So then I think about, okay, so why, if If human motivation stems from the desire to avoid pain and discomfort, why do people do hard things? Why do we exercise? Why do we get in the sauna? Why do we get in the cold plunge? Why do we work hard? Why do we have difficult conversations with loved ones? Why do we do anything that's hard? Because the opposite can also be, being lonely can be hard. Being healthy is hard, right? Doing those things to stay healthy are hard, eating certain foods and avoiding others. But being sick and unhealthy is hard. Being disciplined with your money is hard. Not having money is hard. So motivation can come from either side. It's all about avoiding pain and discomfort. And what I'll suggest is that the pain of discipline is always going to be less than the pain of regret. The pain of doing what you know you should do or that you need to do is going to be over much faster than the pain of not doing it and regretting it. And we're going to take this further. So there's something called aggressive drive, and there's something called pleasure drive, and then we're going to talk about generative drive, okay? Sorry, my dog's making some noise right now. Aggressive drive is that fire inside, right? It's somebody telling you no, you can't do something, and so you want to prove them wrong. It's that part of you that gets angry, it gets pissed off, you get super competitive. Maybe there's envy. Like there's a bunch of different factors that can be involved here, and it can be really powerful, but if it's too high, if that aggressive drive is too high, it can lead to destructive emotions, like wanting what others have and not being happy for them, right? Or getting in the way of them, taking competition too far, right? You might focus too much externally instead of internally. So that's aggressive drive. Pleasure drive is your desire for fun or enjoyment or celebration. This is something that can drive and motivate people, but like aggression, there needs to be balance. Too much pleasure seeking, you can have overindulgence, and too little can leave you burned out or demotivated. Remember going back to Never Summit, this whole idea of constantly striving for more. Yes, it's important, but you also have to take in the views. So making sure you're balancing that pleasure with it. So the healthy balance, the mix is generative drive. This is your ability to have both. It taps into, you feel that fire to improve, but you're also enjoying the process and the journey. You've heard me say this over and over now, that dopamine release isn't just tied to rewards. It's tied to the pursuit of meaningful goals. And when your actions align with that deeper purpose, that why, your brain generates dopamine in a much more sustained and balanced and healthy way, allowing you to stay engaged. So generative drive thrives on this intrinsic internal motivation. It's where the reward isn't just the goal, but the process of becoming better. There's a really accomplished psychologist named Dr. Paul Conti, and he adds to this that motivation that's rooted in purpose can help you reframe pain and discomfort, actual physical pain and discomfort, and emotional pain and discomfort as necessary steps in your journey. Why do people do hard things? Why do people train? Why do people run? Why do people get up early to do these things? Why do people get in the sauna? Why do you get an ice bath? Why do you put yourself in those uncomfortable situations? And what he says is, instead of avoiding those challenges, you embrace them because they're tied to your why. They're tied to your purpose. Your why is the cornerstone of generative drive. Is it about proving something to yourself? Sometimes, maybe, right? Is it about leaving a legacy, supporting your family? Whatever that is, you tie your actions to that purpose. You balance your drives, right? You understand what your pleasure drive is. You understand what your aggressive drive is, and you find that balance between the two to create your intrinsic, your generative drive. Lean into that process. And when you do, your ambition, this whole ambition pillar, becomes not just a goal, but it becomes a way of life. So there you have it. The 5 bricks of the ambition pillar. You're creating your identity, you're selecting your pitches, you're establishing your zone, you're aiming for those Never Summit targets, and you're tapping into your generative drive. And when you put all those together, you're going to be building a mindset that's resilient, that's disciplined, and it's future focused. You're always looking for ways to grow and improve. You're coachable, but yet still confident with where you are and who you are. So that's it. In our next episode, we're going to talk about the last one, the big one, which is mindset. We'll catch you next time.